Hello, everyone. I'm Jeffrey Kerr, contributing editor for Gold Derby. I'm back here with user Alex Meyer. And yesterday we went over our predictions for the SAG Awards. Now we'll be starting to dive into our predictions for the Oscar nominations set to be announced Tuesday morning. And in fact, I should, before we start, let's say that how they'll be announcing the nominations this year will be an involvement from last year, where last year they had pre-recorded segments with previous nominees and winners and stating their reactions to their first nominations, and they're doing some pre-taped segments for the part one while doing live for part two.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Well, yeah. In fact, you and I haven't really discussed how we thought it went. Well, what did you think of the announcement? How the announcements were done last year?
I didn't really mind, to be honest. I don't really mind how they do the announcing, just as long as we see what the nominations are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
Not...
Yeah, because I'm sorry.
I mean, I guess one positive aspect, I guess, of a pre-taped segment is you don't have to worry about like random outbursts from the audience, I guess. Because
Yeah, so in any case, let's start diving into this year's nominations. And we're, of course, starting with the big one, and that's Best Picture. And okay, so I guess the way we'll be going about is that as we go through each category, we'll take turns going first with our predictions. So I'll be starting with Best Picture, and it's a competitive race this year. But in any case, what I currently have in my lineup are Lady Bird, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, The Shape of Water, Get Out, Dunkirk, Call Me By Your Name, The Post, I, Tonya, Darkest Hour, and The Big Sick.
All right. Well, in my lineup, I have, and this is how I rank them in terms of what I think is most and least likely to win. So, and since there are 10 potential slots, I have number 1, The Shape of Water. Number 2, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Number 3, Lady Bird. Number 4, Get Out. Number 5, Dunkirk. Number 6, The Post. Number 7, Call Me By Your Name. Number 8, Darkest Hour. Number 9, I, Tonya. And number 10, Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, okay. So you and I have a similar lineups here with, I guess, one exception. In fact, a great thing, well, even though I personally think the Academy should just stick with 10 slots for Best Picture, but the fact that since 2011 they had a rotating, pendulum of how many Best Picture nominees there can be from 5 to 10. So if you fill out all 10 slots you have in the prediction center, well, odds are you'll most likely get all of them right, depending on what the number is.
Mm-hmm. Last year, I predicted 10 like everyone does, and I ended up correctly predicting all 9 of the nominees that did get into Best Picture.
Yeah, I think I did so as well.
I can't remember what my 10th film was that I predicted.
Wasn't it Silence?
Oh, yes, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I predicted Silence to be nominated for like everything.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that film also starts screening way too late in the year for it to really get anywhere beyond the cinematography.
Which is a damn shame. Because this has been a passion project of Martin Scorsese's for like 25 years.
Well, yeah, and the Academy had their long bias against him until he finally won for The Departed.
Well, yeah, I mean, but they never had a bias against his films per se.
Well, yes, but I meant him personally.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, in any case, well, yeah, I believe, let me check here. 1, 2, well, yeah, most of my predictions they get in a PGA, which of course is taking place today. So we'll see who ends up winning there. But still, yeah, Three Billboards, Shape of Water, The Post, Lady Bird, I, Tonya, Get Out, Dunkirk, and The Big Sick, and Call Me by Your Name all got into PGA, as well as Wonder Woman, and I believe there was what was the 11th film they got in, or did I mention all of them?
I'm not sure. I don't I don't have the list in front of me.
Well, I'll look it up myself.
I think it might. I didn't. I think it. Did you mention? I think didn't either Logan or Wonder Woman get in?
I said Wonder Woman got in at
Oh,
PGA.
I didn't hear you say Wonder Woman. Um, you were just going off the list so fast.
Uh,
Uh, I mean, I
And
don't.
I do have a Darkest Hour getting in, even though it, has been underperforming at a lot of the Guild Awards. I mean, it at least got Best Picture nominations at Critics' Choice, and a little more importantly, BAFTA, since that is an industry award. I mean, right, it could just be the BAFTA voting on their own, the Brits, since that's the British Academy Awards. But yeah, it at least makes me feel a little comfortable about predicting Darkest Hour to get in.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm. I just have a feeling it has a strong chance because it's deals with World War II. It's which is something that Academy voters love.
Mhm.
Deals with an iconic person, another thing voters love, and you know, and just the overall nature of it. It's kind of like to British history what Lincoln is to American history.
Right. And in fact, I should point out Molly's Game was the 11th film nominated at PGA.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah. That's probably not going to be nominated for Best Picture.
Well, yes. In fact, I guess let's talk about the post for a minute because I mean it did well nominations at the Critics Awards, but it says it has been doing slightly better than Silence last year with the industry awards. Like it got in at Producers Guild, it got in at the Art Directors Guild, but it was shut out at SAG, shut out at DGA, shut out at WGA. Even though the screenwriters of the film, Josh Singer and Liz Hannah, are receiving an honorary award, so I guess that's a consolation prize. So, I mean, I guess how could you possibly see the Post doing at this, nominations at this stage?
I could see it doing pretty good, I guess. I don't think it's probably going to win anything at this point. It's going to just have to settle for the nominations. But
Oh, yeah.
I do think the nature of the film, given the story and the cast and the creative team, I think it's just going to be too much for voters to resist. And given the fact that it's well known that most Oscar voters tend to be liberal and support the Democrat Party, if they want to throw in politics, I can see them nominating this film as a way to rebuke the Trump administration.
Hmm. Yes, I agree with
And
that.
let's not forget, since the average Oscar voter is about 63 years old, many of them will have lived through the era of the Pentagon Papers and Nixon's presidency.
And that's very true. Yeah, I have it getting in. Well, as of now, I have it receiving 5 nominations, so we shall see Tuesday morning. So I guess next category, that's best director, and it's your turn now. So what do you think is? Well, I know it before we get on with that. I guess let's talk about our choices for the 10th slot. Why do you have Blade Runner 2049 getting in?
Uh, well, I mean, it's been doing pretty good at most of the Guild Awards in terms of nominations in certain categories, and it's a film that's garnered massive critical acclaim, and there are some who think it's even better than the first film. And this was the kind of film I think many people thought would never see happen, and and when it was made official, many people were waiting with bated breath over just how good or bad it would be. And the fact that it's the fact that it does continue the story of the first film, but makes it look like the sequel was well worth the wait, and the fact that it does have the acclaim it has, and the fact that it's directed by a director who was nominated last year, Denis Villeneuve, that could certainly bring voters' attention to it, especially voters who may have felt that the original Blade Runner didn't get enough love back in 1982, because the original Blade Runner only got nominations for production design and visual effects.
Hmm.
But that could be due to the fact that the film itself received a mixed reception from critics and was a box office bomb.
Yeah.
So
Well, so is 2049. Well, at least a box office bomb, not a critical bomb.
right, but I mean, I guess it just goes to show that while the Blade Runner films haven't had the most widespread appeal. They certainly have a very cult-like appeal, very passionate following. So anyone who's, a passionate fan of this franchise could certainly be willing to nominate it. And I'm sure, probably given the number of voters who've joined the Academy since 1982 and who may have been in and who may love the original Blade Runner movie and love this one, they may feel tempted to nominate it for that.
Hmm.
I mean, there's no way at all it's going to win Best Picture. I mean, so people praying for it to win should stop praying now, because
Yeah, the Academy has had their long bias against science fiction.
Mhm. Well, plus, I mean, there are other science fiction films of this decade that are better. Like I wouldn't rank this higher than films like The Martian or Gravity or Interstellar or um,
Arrival.
Arrival. Yeah, I wouldn't rank it any higher than those films.
Oh, okay. Now, okay, and I have the Big Sick taking the 10 slots because, well, again, it got in at PGA. I mean, which is helpful, but then again, I mean, there's only one other category I currently have it getting in for, which we'll get to soon. So I'm not sure how it could do overall, but I guess it's more or less a placeholder for me.
Hmm.
All right, now on to Best Director. Who do you have getting in?
Okay, so I have Guillermo del Toro for The Shape of Water, Christopher Nolan for Dunkirk, Jordan Peele for Get Out, Greta Gerwig for Lady Bird, and Steven Spielberg for The Post.
Oh,
And this is and the way I announce the names, this is how I rank them in terms of most and least likely to win.
or even get nominated.
Right.
Yeah, since we're only discussing nominations at this stage. But
Right.
yeah, as for, okay, I have the same top two as you, but I have Martin McDonagh getting in for Three Billboards, followed by Greta Gerwig for Lady Bird and Jordan Peele for Get Out.
Hmm.
So yes, I'm predicting the same five lineup at DGA because I'm really not sure, well, not too sure who could miss out on the Oscars, and I so, but then again, because the last time DJ correctly forecasted all five Best Director nominees was 2009, where the nominees were James Cameron for Avatar, Catherine Bigelow for The Hurt Locker, Quentin Tarantino for Inglourious Bastards, Lee Daniels for Precious, and Jason Reitman for Up in the Air. And you can almost see the parallels between this year's DGA nominees and the Best Director nominees of that year.
I guess, yeah, but I think with Three Billboards, I think most people regard it more as a writer's achievement and not a director's achievement.
Well, yes, but
Even though Martin McDonagh always pulls double duty in his films, where he always both writes and directs, I think that more attention for Three Billboards has gone to its writing rather than its directing.
well, yes, but we've seen more writer achievements get in for directing before, like Kenneth Lonergan last year for Manchester by the Sea, or Tom McCarthy for Spotlight 2 years ago.
Right. But I have, you know, but I have Spielberg getting in here just because, he's already an Academy darling, having won 3 Oscars. He put this film together in only 9 months, which is something most directors, even the veteran directors, wouldn't be able to accomplish, and yet still make it look really good. And just the timely nature of the post's themes, I think, will help it get in there.
Well, yes, I agree. That's definitely what makes. That's definitely why I think it's possible he could still make the cut. I mean, though I have Jordan Peele in fifth place because, the directors branch of the Academy tends to have their bias against actors turned directors. I mean, with some exceptions like Ron Howard, Clint Eastwood, Mel Gibson, but then again, they have also turned their noses at Denzel Washington and, well, Ben Affleck famously for Argo. But then again, I guess even though on paper Get Out does not seem like an awards contender at all, I mean it still has all this momentum, and Three Billboards has been overperforming, which is why I think it'd be pretty foolish to not predict McDonagh to make it in for directing. and well, of course, then again, I'm sure the Academy members would like to have an African American nominee like Peele, and especially as membership is growing with more people of color and women, which is definitely helpful in the case of Greta Gerwig.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the reason. It's the Academy's invitation of more diverse members that is why I have Jordan Peele ranked higher. Although I'm sure plenty of white directors will nominate him too, because he's going to need a vote from a wide variety of demographics in order to get the nomination. But uh, but I just feel that with the best director category, there's always at least one major snub every year, and I just and I'm trying to anticipate who that might be just for whatever reason, and I could see it being McDonough just because there is some controversy of whether or not Three Billboards tries to redeem some of its characters, like Sam Rockwell's character, too much, and maybe some of the blowback from that could cost McDonough a nomination here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, though I've heard from some people that they feel concerned Nolan might just miss the cut for Best Director again, like he did for Inception, even though, unlike that year where he got in for screenplay but not director, I think the opposite is likely to happen this year, where he gets in director but not screenplay.
Right. Well, no one's really been predicting Dunkirk to get nominated for screenplay anyway. If it does, it's going to be considered a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since it's kind of the opposite of Three Billboards, where most people have praised Dunkirk more for its directing rather than its writing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's partly due to the Inception snub that Nolan will make it in here, because I think voters will sometimes feel, well, we made a mistake by not nominating this person for this film the previous time, and we better not get that kind of backlash again.
Well,
I think the one to blame for Nolan's snub for 2010 was the Coen brothers. If they hadn't come in at the last minute with their critically acclaimed remake of True Grit, I think Nolan would have easily been nominated.
mm-hmm. Or imagine if there were only 6 slots.
Right.
Yeah, but I guess before, well, yes, and again, the Academy, again, the director's branch of the Academy tends to have their bias against actor-turned-directors, and of course, Peele did receive 2 DGA nominations, not just for feature film directing, but first feature film. I mean, of course, that branch, that guild also features a bunch of TV people, and Peele's from TV, so go figure.
Mm-hmm. Well, but I still think he's going to be nominated no matter what.
Well, yes, absolutely. I'm just again, the directors branch of the Academy has their bias against actor-turned-directors, like when Ron Howard was famously snubbed for Apollo 13, and of course Mel Gibson won that year for Braveheart, and Ben Affleck snubbed for Argo. Yet, of course, that became his narrative, where it resulted in Argo winning Best Picture.
Right, but even if Affleck had been nominated, Argo probably still would have won Best Picture anyway, because it was pretty much sweeping everywhere else.
Well, yes, that was another factor that played into his narrative, because as I guess Academy members were watching how Argo was building tons of momentum, they started to feel bad about snubbing Affleck for a directing nomination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so now on to Best Actress. Okay, the nominees I have are Frances McDormand for Three Billboards, Saoirse Ronan for Lady Bird, Sally Hawkins for The Shape of Water, Margot Robbie for I, Tonya, and Meryl Streep for The Post.
I have the same lineup, but just in a slightly different order. I
Okay.
have Frances McDormand in first place, Sally Hawkins in second, Saoirse Ronan in third, Margot Robbie in fourth, and Meryl Streep in fifth.
Well, I guess I just have Saoirse Ronan ranked a little higher up, given that Lady Bird is a potential Best Picture winner. Well, so is Three Billboards and Shape of Water, so go figure. But Ronan also fits the mold of the ingenue, because that's the Academy's usual choice in the Best Actress category. And of course, especially as evidence within the last 2 years with Brie Larson and Emma Stone winning this category, and I guess given that a lot of Academy members are still a bunch of old white guys, I mean, you have to question if they're the ones voting for the ingenue, because if that's the case, then they're pretty much perverts.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, at least. Well, I mean, at least these women aren't underage because then we'd be in a real bad situation. But
Well, yeah, especially with the Me Too movement.
right. But anyway, I have Sally Hawkins ranked higher just because her role is more unique and it's the kind of role that often wins Oscars, where in this case she plays a mute woman who communicates primarily through sign language.
Well, yes,
And
and she
when your role is significantly different and requires you to do a different level of acting, that generally helps you win. I mean, like with Patty Duke for The Miracle Worker, or
and Marley
Holly
Matlin
Hunter, Holly Hunter for The Piano.
and Marley Matlin for Children of a Lesser God.
hmm
Well, yes, you
Although of
can.
course in Marley Matlin's case, that was like the one time where the performer actually was deaf.
Well, yes, and I was about to say, and yes, you do make a case for Hawkins, sort of fitting the mold as like the one apple in a bag of oranges or vice versa. But I guess another reasoning to my rankings is that while McDormand won on the drama side at the Globes, Ronan won on the comedy side, and Hawkins lost to McDormand, and McDormand won the combined actress race at Critics' Choice. So I don't know. I haven't really seen Hawkins win anything major to really keep her in mind. But again, she's still possible. Like, we'll see what happens at SEG tomorrow night. And I guess I should also point out that, well, I mean, well, in fact, let's talk about how we have Meryl Streep in fifth place. She got in that Critics' Choice and Golden Globes for The Post, yet did not get in at SAG nor BAFTA. I mean, granted, you can probably play on if enough of those voters were even able to see The Post in time, since The Post had just started screening around the time SAG nominating voting was ending. And of course, The Post, of course, its release was apparently yesterday in the UK. So again, it's a question of how many of the voters at SAG and BAFTA are even able to see it in time.
Yeah. Uh, I have her ranked last just because the post came out later than all these other contenders, and plus some voters may feel that since she already has 3 Oscars, she doesn't need another one right now.
And
And
20 nominations.
yeah, and Margot Robbie, she's been steadily building her career ever since her huge breakout role in The Wolf of Wall Street back in 2013,
Yeah.
which some people I know were thought she was snubbed for in the Best Supporting Actress race, but let's be honest, even if she were nominated, she wouldn't have been able to take down Lupita Nyong'o for 12 Years a Slave.
Though I'm not sure how much effect people thought she could have won had she been nominated.
Well, I don't think she could have. I don't think she could have won.
Well, I'm not. Well, I'm just saying. I don't know if people thought she should have won had she been nominated. Is what I'm saying.
Right. But mm,
Well,
uh,
yes. In fact, the point I just remembered about Hawkins is that, well, not to mention that I guess of of the top three I've listed, Ronan has also been probably the one who's been most visible during award season, while McDormand has, I guess, showing more visibility, well, with her speeches at Critics' Choice and the Globes. While Hawkins, well, I mean, where has she been out with the movie? Granted, not that campaigning always matters. Just ask Mark Rylance or Monique.
right. Or I mean, she didn't really do any Emmy campaigning for Olive Kitteridge either, but she
Right,
won that.
and she gave the shortest acceptance speech ever by saying thank you and then walked off stage.
Well, actually, I think but yeah. So she like tied herself there with Merritt Weaver for Nurse Jackie.
Yeah, so now on to, well, I guess other possibilities. I am definitely keeping Streep in because I even wrote an article about her possibility on whether or not she's gonna get in or not, and of course with Streep, well, again, if she gets in, it'll be the first time Spielberg had directed a Best Actress Oscar nomination since Whoopi Goldberg in The Color Purple 32 years ago.
That's true.
Mhm. Yes, and I guess looking at, I guess the only most likely possibility could be Jessica Chastain for Molly's Games, and since she's well, I just saw that movie a few days ago, and she really just such a great performance in that, especially acting out Aaron Sorkin dialogue, even being directed by him.
Yeah, and she hasn't been nominated since Zero Dark 30.
Hmm.
She's definitely overdue for a nomination.
Well,
And I honestly thought she should have won the Oscar for Zero Dark 30 over Jennifer Lawrence for Silver Linings Playbook, because I get into a lot of arguments with people because I think Silver Linings Playbook it's a good movie, but I think it's overrated, and I don't think it's a like this masterpiece of a film like a lot of people think.
well, that's another conversation for another time. But I guess now on to Best Actor. Who do you have in your lineup?
Uh, Hold on. Okay. So I have Gary Oldman for Darkest Hour, Timothy Chalamet for Call Me by Your Name, Daniel Day-Lewis for Phantom Thread, Daniel Kaluuya for Get Out, and Tom Hanks for The Post.
Okay, I have those same five getting in. And in slightly reversed order because I do have Oldman and Chalamet in the top two, well, same order. But I have Daniel Kaluuya in third place because I feel like the acting branch would want to show diversity because this year it hasn't been as diverse as last year in the acting categories, and I'm sure, especially with the more diverse Academy members, they really would like to avoid another Oscar so white. So I have Kaluuya ranked slightly higher up, and I have Daniel Day Lewis in fourth place. I just have a slight feeling he may end up missing the cut, but I still have him getting in. And of course, Tom Hanks in fifth place because even though I am worrisome because again, Post did not show up at BAFTA nor SAG, which is the big industry awards for the actors. And Hanks has not been nominated since Castaway, and he's been in several Best Picture nominees since, which he hasn't even been nominated for.
And he certainly was more worthy of a nomination than some of the contenders in some of the categories in recent years. Like, he was far more worthy of a nomination for Captain Phillips than Christian Bale was for American Hustle.
Hmm.
And he was probably and he was certainly far more worthy of a supporting actor nomination for Saving Mr. Banks than Bradley Cooper was for American Hustle.
Well, well, yes, as you can tell, ladies and gentlemen, he's just not the biggest David O. Russell fan. But again, that's
Yeah.
another conversation for another time. But yeah, I have Hanks.
Well, let me just clarify. I don't hate David O. Russell's movies per se. I'm
I,
not like I don't like.
I didn't say that. I
No,
just
no,
said
no.
you're not the biggest fan.
I just don't want listeners to think that I'm someone who just hates everything he does, because I don't. I just think he's a little overpraised in terms of critical and audience likeness towards his films. That's all. His
Well,
films are just too over the top at times.
in any case, back to Hanks here. Well, I have him getting in, especially since, I just feel if the Academy nominates Streep, I just can't see them ignoring Hanks because, if anyone here has seen The Post, you know that the movie is basically between the two of them. They have their own halves and they intersect at times throughout, where I just don't think it would seem right to see one of them recognized but not the other.
Right. Well, I mean, plus, not only is Tom Hanks way overdue for an Oscar, but
Well,
he
nomination.
right. Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah, because he already has two.
Right. Well, yeah. Sorry, I was looking at something else while I was trying to say that. So not only is he overdue for another nomination, but I think he has the greater momentum now that what everyone was presuming to be the fifth nominee, James Franco, for The Disaster Artist, his chances of being nominated now seem highly questionable given the accusations of sexual harassment that came out right after he won the Golden Globe for Best Actor in a Musical or Comedy. Now, of course, he could possibly still be nominated due to the fact that Oscar voting had already started by the time the Golden Globes came out, and it ended on the 12th. And once you send in your ballot, you can't take it back. That you can't change it. So, and there was that Los Angeles Times article of people admitting to have nominated him but admitting if they had known about the accusations, they would not have nominated him. But now that their votes are in, there's nothing that can be done about it.
Yeah,
Now,
we
if he
should.
does get now, if he should get nominated, the question will be, will he even bother showing up, or
Well,
should
he
he
is.
even show up?
Well, he is planning to show up at SAG tomorrow night.
Which should be very interesting when they get to the clip of his nomination. If whether or not people, I'm sure the applause will probably be more muted than the
Mhm.
other nominees, and uh, but yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, if by chance he does get in there, he's probably going to be ranked at the very bottom in terms of likelihood of winning.
Mhm.
Although of course, accusations against Casey Affleck didn't stop him from winning. But then again, we've seen a lot more awareness of sexual harassment in Hollywood following his Oscar win with the Me Too movement and everything. So I could see Oscar voters not wanting to create controversy again.
Well, yeah, we shall see if enough Academy members even took work. Well, we shall see how many Academy members had already submitted their ballots with Franco in it on them in time when his allegations broke.
Well, according to reports that I've read, I mean, they don't reveal like who's getting the most votes or anything, but apparently with voting, a lot of voters will send in their ballots in the first few days. Then there'll be like a little layover with a few coming in here or there, and then there'll be like a surge at the last minute of people sending in their ballots because they either been scrambling to fill them out, or they were weighing their minds very carefully before.
Well, yeah, they really wanted time to think things through.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yes, so now on to supporting actress. The lineup I currently have are Laurie Metcalf, Lady Bird, Allison Janney, I, Tanya, Octavia Spencer, The Shape of Water, Mary J. Blige, Mudbound, and Holly Hunter, The Big Sick.
I have the same five, except I have Allison Janney in first place and Laurie Metcalf in second, but I have the same bottom three.
Okay, yes. Yeah, because again, this is an opportunity where we could see at least one person of color nominated. Like I have two. Well, we both have two getting in, which are Spencer and Blige, and I guess Hong Chow could be a possibility for downsizing, especially if they want to throw an Asian in there. But that film has very much been under the radar.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. It's a decent film, but it's not, and she's the best thing about it. But it's definitely not one of Alexander Payne's best. Like it's nowhere near good as say Sideways or The Descendants or Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, yeah, nominating her would definitely bring more diversity to the category because Asian performers are always far underrepresented at all award shows, quite significantly less than uh, black actors and actresses. But there's been some controversy over Hong Chau's character of whether or not her character is the best thing about downsizing or if she comes across as like a racial stereotype because she has like a very thick accent because her character is a Vietnamese refugee and Hong Chau in real life speaks with a regular American accent. But I know that from reports I've read, she like vigorously pursued this role, and she was like, she really, really wanted it, and because she said she found a lot of value in the character, and indeed her character does do a lot to try and help the marginalized section of the downsizing community because while there are a lot of people living in these big mansions and just living, you know, high society life high society lifestyle, there's like the small section that everybody else ignores of like the poor, the marginalized, and the people who are like doing really badly, and she's the one that goes around bringing food, bringing medicine, and all that.
Hmm. Well, yeah, that's another reason why I don't have Chow getting in, given, I guess, the whole controversy on whether or not her character is a stereotype or not. Though, I mean, and of course, we shall see because, well, and while of course we shall see if Netflix does better with the feature films this time around than they did with Beast of No Nation 2 years ago. I mean, I think it definitely has potential, which is why I don't have Mary J. Blige in last place, especially given that the whole nature of her performance, where you almost don't even recognize her when she comes on screen.
No, she definitely doesn't give off the "look at me, I'm a singer trying to do some acting" persona that you sometimes see with singers doing acting, because like I'm sure when most people saw Lady Gaga in American Horror Story, they probably just were like, "Oh, look, it's Lady Gaga because she's wearing all these elaborate costumes and everything." Whereas with Mary J. Blige, she's not trying to be like the R&B diva, that she likes to be in real life. She's not trying to be her music persona.
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
yes, and I have Holly Hunter in last place. Well, mainly because she did get in at SAG, and I believe, yeah, and Critics' Choice as well. But again, and we shall see, because if Big Sick gets in for Best Picture, we could see search for, in terms of nominations here for Holly Hunter. Even though, that film came out in the summer and has been doing pretty well and some of the precursors in terms of nominations, but we shall see.
Hmm. And also, there were a lot more Netflix films listed in the eligible Best Picture list for this year.
Hmm.
Because we had not just Mudbound, but many films that were released on Netflix, like First They Killed My Father, Okja, The Meyerowitz Stories. Those were all listed as being eligible. And I think the new Academy president, John Bailey, said something like he'd be willing in the future, if like Netflix keeps making more and more movies and releasing them only on Netflix and not in any theaters, they might be willing to tweak the Best Picture eligibility rules. But um, but that would have to be once like Netflix becomes like the most domineering movie studio on the planet, which I don't think they will be.
Well, yes. So now on to supporting actor. Who do you have in your rankings?
Okay, so I have Sam Rockwell for Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, Willem Dafoe for The Florida Project, Richard Jenkins for The Shape of Water, Christopher Plummer for All the Money in the World, and Woody Harrelson for Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri.
Okay, I have the same top four, and while the fifth slot, I'm kind of back and forth on that. I currently have Army Hammer getting in for Call Me by Your Name because I think, again, I guess my whole Streep and Hanks arguments, that I'm not sure if I could see the acting branch recognizing Chalamet without recognizing, I guess, his partner in crime in Call Me by Your Name, Army Hammer. But then again, Hammer was able to get that Critics' Choice and the Globes, but hasn't gotten in any of the industry awards.
Right, no SAG nomination, no BAFTA nomination, whereas Woody Harrelson has gotten in for both, which is why I have him here. And plus, one thing that can often help actors and actresses get nominations is visibility in terms of how many projects you have out.
Well,
Sometimes
yeah.
sometimes that can be a detriment, like when Ryan Gosling had Crazy Stupid Love, Drive, and The Ides of March all come out in 2011, and he didn't get a nomination for any of them when many people thought he'd at least get nominated for, I think at the very least, Drive or The Ides of March. But at least with
And
Woody.
and Hanks for Captain Phillips and Saving Mr. Banks.
Mhm. But in this case, Woody Harrelson, he had four films in 2017. In addition to Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, he was also in Wilson, War for the Planet of the Apes, and The Glass Castle.
Yes.
And, e- and even though, and even though two of those films, particularly Wilson and The Glass Castle, didn't really get the greatest reviews from critics, one thing that most critics did agree upon was that Harrelson's performance in both of those films were phenomenal. And having seen both of those films, he is the best thing about those films for sure.
Hmm. Well, yes. Again, I am tempted to put Harrelson in there because I'd be thrilled to see him nominated anyway, because he was definitely a standout to me in Three Billboards, especially an unexpected twist, which I won't ruin for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, but it definitely takes an unexpected twist in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we should. It's also interesting because early on, people were predicting two actors from the same film nominated in this category, except it would have been Armie Hammer and Michael Stuhlbarg for "Call Me by Your Name."
Mm-hmm. But now that we've seen the results of other award shows, it appears that "Call Me by Your Name" isn't getting as much love as many people thought it would. I mean,
Yeah,
it's going to be a contender for sure, but it's not going to be like the big contender. And
yeah.
I think in the future, a lot of Academy voters are going to look at LGBT themed films and they're going to compare them to, say, Moonlight, because since we're right off of Moonlight winning Best Picture, I think in a lot of voters' minds, they're probably thinking, before they even watch Call Me by Your Name, they're probably going to think, how how on the same will this be on the same level as Moonlight or not? And if they feel it's not, then they might feel, well, if it's not on the same level of Moonlight in terms of this, or this, or this, then we might as well not nominate it in that category.
Hmm. Well,
So
yeah.
for,
I'm sorry.
so for instance, if they don't find Armie Hammer's performance as good as, say, Mahershala Ali's performance in Moonlight, for which he did win the Oscar, they might feel, eh, let's pass him over.
Or
Well, and
Jake
plus,
Gyllenhaal in Brokeback Mountain.
right, but in that case, well, but Gyllenhaal didn't win the Oscar for Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah, but he was at least nominated.
Right, right. But then again, Call Me by Your Name, maybe it couldn't. There could be some controversy. I know there already has been about the fact that Chalamet's character is 17 and Hammer's is 24, so that could make some voters uncomfortable. I know it certainly made James Woods uncomfortable,
Mm.
and he's an Academy voter.
Mm-hmm.
Although, of course, well, James Woods is very conservative and homophobic, so he's probably not even going to nominate it anyway.
Well, yeah, and we should also point out how Brokeback Mountain was famously upset for Best Picture by Crash 12 years ago. But last year, Poetic Justice was done when Moonlight pulled the upset for Best Picture over La La Land.
Hmm. But then again, we can probably also attribute that to more younger and more liberal-minded voters being invited into the Academy since 2005, because
Right.
you had older people like who are now deceased, but who were alive then, like I think it was Tony Curtis and Ernest Borgnine, who both publicly slammed the film Brokeback Mountain and calling it disgusting for its gay themes. And I think one of them even said, if John Wayne is rolling in his grave, because John Wayne was well known for being very homophobic.
Well, yeah, of course. When Brokeback Mountain lost Best Picture, people accused the Academy of being anti-LGBT, homophobia, all that.
I'm sure it played a big part to a certain degree, although I'm sure some people probably, I would assume, voted for Crash simply because they thought it was the better movie and not because they were homophobic. But the only way we'd know for sure is you'd have to ask each individual voter themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, but in terms of, so yeah, so I mean, in terms of Call Me by Your Name, I'm guessing I've apparently in Italy the age of consent is below 17, so I don't think there's any illegal aspects of their relationship there. But I mean, I could see how maybe I don't know, maybe the fact that it's about the very, very high upper class, maybe some voters might feel we don't need another one of those films to be nominated because too many of them have been nominated in the past.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, and I was going to say about Stillbarg. I mean, he could. I think he could still somewhat get in, but that's a long shot at this point. But I guess a lot of people were predicting him early on because, one, he gave really a speech near the end of the film, and as well as the fact that he also has, some small bit parts in Shape of Water and the Post. So people, I guess, early on thought he could John C. Riley his way into a nomination.
Mm. Well, but in John C. Riley's case, when he was nominated for Chicago, he was a major supporting player in the movie with a very significant amount of screen time, which certainly helped him in getting the nomination.
Well, yeah, and he was also in Gangs of New York and The Hours, which were both also up for Best Picture that year.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it seems that I guess the whole Hammer and Stillbar campaign has pretty much been canceling themselves out at SAG and BAFTA.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now on to adapted screenplay. The lineup I currently have are Call Me By Your Name, Molly's Game, Mudbound, The Disaster Artist, and Wonder.
I have the same five, just a slightly different lineup. I have Call Me By Your Name, Mudbound in second place, then Molly's Game, then The Disaster Artist, and then Wonder.
Okay, yeah, I get. Well, yeah, I previously did have Mudbound ranked in second, but as that film doesn't seem as likely to get in for Best Picture, I mean, I'm at this point overall predicting it to receive 4 nominations. But and plus there is again the whole Netflix factor. But hey, it should be lucky that this is a slow year in the adapted screenplay race.
Hmm. Well, I think Mudbound has a higher chance of getting nominated here because uh, they had to they had to take on the challenge of adapting a novel told from several characters' perspectives, and I've actually read the novel, and they had to be able to find a way to make it coherent, but still give each character their own chance to tell the story, and they succeed at doing that really well. So, and and I think and also the fact that uh, that this could add some greater diversity to the category, and the fact that it portrays um, the friendship between a white man and a black man after World War II in a time where racism was very common, and this is set in rural Mississippi. And I think the friendship between these men and the prejudice they face as a result could certainly draw some parallels to the increased racism we've seen since Donald Trump took office, notably with the neo-Nazi rallies in Virginia last summer.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
the Ku Klux Klan happened to be major, well, not major because they don't appear near until the end of the movie, but they do appear in Mudbound, and they create a situation that has long-lasting consequences for several characters. So I could see how voters may draw a lot of parallels between the events in Mudbound with the events of what we've seen last year.
well, yes, and I should also point out that Mudbound was written. The screenplay for Mudbound was written by 2 people: a white man and a black woman.
Mm. I thought Virgil Williams is mixed race. I thought I read somewhere he's mixed race.
Oh,
Hold on, I'll
well, I know he at least isn't black.
well, hold on. Let me. Thought I hold on a minute. Because I was reading an article or something. Let me try and see if I can find it.
Okay, I'm looking here. I'm not sure if I can find it.
Oh, there's.
No, I guess while you're looking that up, and well, again, I guess another reason I have Molly's Game ranked higher than Mudbound was because, well, because there was a lot of admiration for Aaron Sorkin's directorial debut, and I guess the writers' branch probably feel they owe him a nomination after snubbing him for Steve Jobs 2 years ago.
Right. I'm sure he'll get nominated, but like I said before with Mudbound, my reasons for what I said, I think why it has a higher chance. Oh, okay, here it is. So he wrote an article for the Los Angeles Times back in December, and this is what he says. Uh, he said, race and identity themes have played like a steady bass line in the song of my life. I'm African American and Puerto Rican.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
And
so
yeah.
I guess now onto original screenplay. This is going to be competitive not only to see who will win in the end, but who's going to fill out all 5 slots. So who do you have in your rankings?
So right now I have Get Out, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, Lady Bird, The Shape of Water, and The Post.
I have those same 5, I mean, ranked differently. I have Lady Bird, Three Billboards, Get Out, The Shape of Water, and The Post.
I just feel that Get Out has a better chance of winning here because it did win at the Critics' Choice Awards, and
Well,
the
even
Critics'
though they don't have a shared voting unit with the Academy.
no, but the winners of Best Adapted an Original Screenplay at the Critics' Choice Awards quite often go on to mirror who will eventually win the Oscar. So and I mean, and we'll have to see what BAFTA does, because if the BAFTAs also vote Get Out for Best Original Screenplay, then I think it probably takes the Oscar too.
Well, we shall also see what WGA has to say, and of course, at BAFTA, Get Out isn't even up for Best Picture there.
No, but we've seen a lot of screenplays that were nominated for there, but not Best Picture, either be nominated or win. So we shouldn't count it out entirely. And I think the themes about race and you know and racism, particularly among liberal whites, will probably resonate a lot with voters and will make them think a lot about what they've watched after they've finished watching the movie. So I think that could certainly help its chances of winning here. And the fact that it was a massive critical and audience success certainly can't hurt its chances either.
Well, I get that, but then again, there is still the whole genre biased against it that I'm not sure how if it'll be if they can overcome that. But yeah, and even though Three Billboards was not eligible at WGA, it did win the Globe, and we'll see how it does going forward at BAFTA. But yeah, I think because if you ask me, I think whoever wins original screenplay is winning Best Picture, and I even though I could see Get Out being a viable contender, I don't think it will happen at this point. But yeah.
And I just go by what I've seen so far in terms of other shows winning, because at this point the guilds haven't really spoken yet, so we can't go by too much of what they think, because since the guilds have the actual Academy members voting, so it's just a random guess at this point.
Well, I get that, and plus, I guess another reason for me having Lady Bird up so high is that, well, of course, Greta Gerwig's, I guess, visibility at the Globes, where even though she did not win screenplay, I mean, still, when that film won Best Comedy, the producers had her go center stage to make a speech for herself, and that might just be on minds of Academy members. Like, in fact, it's interesting. Like every year, there's always different topic for discussion at the Oscars. Like 2 years ago, it was lack of diversity. Last year, it was President Trump, and this year, it's probably going to be female empowerment.
True.
Yeah. Yes, and of course, other possibilities in this category are probably The Big Sick and I, Tonya, which both got in at the Writers Guild, while Three Billboards, which wasn't eligible, did not. Neither did The Post, even though the screenwriters of that are receiving an honorary award.
Yeah, I mean, I, Tanya, certainly surprised at the BAFTAs with its Best Original Screenplay nomination there.
It surprised me at WGA as well.
Mm-hmm. Although this race is already pretty crowded, so I don't really know how much of a chance it has to break in here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess now on to Best Cinematography. The current lineup I have is The Shape of Water, Dunkirk, Blade Runner 2049, Darkest Hour, Mudbound.
All right. I have several different rankings, and a few actually you did not mention. I think I was just taking care of my dog for a sec because he was begging for attention.
Okay.
While carrying my computer around. So I currently have Blade Runner 2049, Dunkirk, The Shape of Water, Call Me by Your Name, and Mudbound.
Yeah, Call Me by Your Name is definitely a possibility, though I guess another possibility I could see, I mean, even though I will likely not predict it, is Wonderstruck, especially given how that film, as its focuses on two different timelines. It has different color scheme, like in the 1920s it's black and white, in the 1970s, well, it's color.
Yeah. I mean, if I were a member of the Academy in the cinematographers branch, I personally would have absolutely nominated Wonderstruck on my ballot.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, and I guess I have Darkest Hour getting in. Well, I guess because Bruno Delbonnel. Well, I mean, I guess when you try to predict nominations, you should see who's behind it because people like Bruno Delbonnel, he's been nominated at least 4 times, I believe. He was even nominated for Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince.
Right, but I know that with the Craft Awards, when they have the list of films for voters to choose from, especially if they're voting online, they don't normally list the name of the person. They only list the movie because I guess they want to avoid turning it into a popularity contest. And some say that might be the reason why Roger Deakins has still never won an Oscar.
Well, I should also point out
Well,
that
I'm sure most of the cinematographers know who, if depending on how well they know each other,
well,
I'm
yeah,
sure they
because
probably know
well,
who
yeah.
has filmed what movie. But
Well, yeah, that's why people like Roger Deakins, Kevin O'Connell, and Thomas Newman keep getting nominations almost every year because it's their categories are the nominations for their categories are voted on by peer groups.
yep.
Yeah, plus Darkest Hour did get in for cinematography at BAFTA, even though that might as well have just been a British thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna always look at the BAFTAs as the best example of what to predict for here because I mean, sure they may have a lot of overlap, but they'll if a film has a very British feel, they'll shower it with a lot of love. I mean, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy was nominated in practically every BAFTA category. It got like 11 BAFTA nominations, I think. I don't know the exact number, but it only got 3 nominations at the Oscars, although in pretty big categories for Best Actor, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Original Score. But that was it. No, nothing else for anybody else in that movie.
Yeah.
I think Blade Runner 2049. I think there's always that nagging feeling that Deakins is always being robbed every time he loses an Oscar. So they may finally feel, all right, let's just give it to him already, even though many people have praised the cinematography of Blade Runner 2049 as the best aspect of the movie. So it's not like they're just giving it to him out of pure consolation, I guess. But I mean, although maybe we could possibly see Dunkirk win something. I mean, win this category at least because that's what I personally would like to see win, particularly for the aerial sequences in the film because they give a lot of how the hell did they do that moments.
Uh-huh.
And then the Shape of Water, I think, has a very strong chance of being nominated at least just because of the angles they use and the color palette. And then while I haven't seen Call Me by Your Name yet, because I'm planning to see it this weekend, the trailers certainly show like a lot of imagery that Oscar voters usually love with like a lot of sunlight and things like that. And then Mudbound, I think, will have its chance of being nominated because it features a lot of outdoor shots, since there are a lot of shots of like fields and trees and the sky, and plus it's a period film, and these tend to do very well at the
and not
Oscars.
and not to mention
And also because I think they may finally feel that it's time for a woman to be nominated here because no female cinematographer has ever gotten a best cinematography nomination. I
well,
think
yes,
I think
I'm sorry.
I think this might be the one category in Oscar history where so far no woman has ever been nominated.
I think you're right because I was on a Gold Derby hangout chat with Tony Ruiz, Riley Chow, and Zach Laws last night, and I believe I heard the same thing.
Yeah, I mean we've seen women be nominated and even win in a lot of categories that are overwhelmingly male, like sound and visual effects, but
And editing.
yeah, well, quite a number of women have actually won at editing Oscars. If you look at the
Well,
longest,
yeah, like Verna Fields, I believe, Thelma Schoonmaker, Claire Simpson.
but even hold on, let me get the list right here. But even back in like the golden age of Hollywood,
Oh,
where
Marsha Lucas.
right, but I'm talking even earlier than that. I mean, even in the golden age of Hollywood, where women didn't do too many behind the scenes jobs, there were actually quite a lot of female editors who were nominated and won Oscars. Let me just get the list right here.
And I should point out, I guess the reason I have Blade Runner ranked a little lower is that, well, yes, Deakins does have the overdue factor, but of course, when it comes to final voting for the winners, the names do not appear on the ballots for the below the line category. So it'll be a matter of how many Academy members were even aware that Deakins shot Blade Runner 2049, let alone the fact that he's overdue.
Hmm. I'm sure many of them probably know he's overdue because, the press always brings it up. So,
Well,
but I
yes.
mean, well, plus anyone
Which
who
might have
attends.
helped Kevin O'Connell last year, as press came out. Oh, he's the biggest loser in Oscar history, and they probably became like I remember hearing on a podcast with Andrew Carden that one of them heard that at least one Academy member voted for Hacksaw Ridge for sound mixing because they knew Kevin O'Connell was one of the sound mixers and that he was long overdue.
Hmm. I mean, I could see a lot of cinematographers feeling the same way, or just a lot of people. I mean, I could see both Ryan Gosling and Harrison Ford voting for Deacon since they're both Academy members, and why would they not vote for their own film? Because you are allowed to vote for yourself or for films that you appeared in. So, I mean, I'm sure, you know,
Well, yes. Plus, another argument I have for Shape of Water, and I guess possibly Dunkirk, is that about within the last 5 years, the awards for cinematography and director went hand in hand. So I think with Del Toro out front for directing Shape of Water, I could just see a case for it in cinematography.
true, but we've also had several winners, you've also had several cinematography winners that don't line up with directing, like Inception, Hugo, Life of Pi. Oh wait, no, Life of Pi. No, that did
Yeah,
win
yeah.
directing.
Yes, that's
Um,
what I'm saying. The last 5 years, 2012, 2013, 15, 16, 17. Well, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, the last 5 years, the awards for Best Director and Cinematography have gone hand in hand.
mhm. But I mean, we'll have to see what the guilds say because at this point, there's no way to tell. I mean, people
Yeah.
are just okay. Actually, yeah, the very first woman to win an Oscar for film editing was Anne Bouchens in 1940 for Northwest Mounted Police.
Wow.
And then
Never heard
other,
of.
yeah, and then so yeah, and then the second one was in 1944. Barbara McLean won for Wilson, which was a biopic of President Woodrow Wilson, and then uh, uh, yeah,
Well,
and then
well, I'm
Adrian.
sorry.
Hold on, let me see if this is a woman. Yep, Adrian Fazan won in 1958 for Gigi, and then see in the 60s, and then of course, and then you had Anne V. Coates win for Lawrence of Arabia, and then Francoise Bonnat won for Z.
Hmm.
So, so there's quite a
Yeah.
lot of, and then there have been
Well,
many other women nominated in the editing category all throughout the decade. So women in terms of film editing, women have had quite a lot of success in this industry, even in the beginning of Hollywood.
hmm well, yes. So I guess now moving on to the next category, since we talked about cinematography long enough, and I believe it's your turn to start with your rankings.
Okay, so best costume design. Okay, so currently I have Phantom Thread, Beauty and the Beast, The Greatest Showman, The Shape of Water, and Darkest Hour.
Oh, well, I have four of those same five. The only difference is I actually do not have Darkest Hour getting in, probably because of its guild snub, while I have the fifth slot getting, I have Victoria and Abdul taking it.
Mm. I mean, we could see a possibility of that, but I just have a strong feeling Darkest Hour could pull it off here just because of its greater chances of being a Best Picture contender than Victoria and Abdul.
Well, yes, but that film has been underperforming at a lot of these guild awards.
Right, but well, but I think that, when it comes to costume design, they always want more elaborateness, just more of everything. I mean, while Victorian Abdul does have that to a certain extent, it only really focuses on the two characters. Whereas in Darkest Hour, you have not just Winston Churchill, but you have several scenes where he's addressing all of Parliament. So, that obviously required a lot of effort on the costume designer's part to measure every actor in the scene and design a suit that will fit them, or find a suit that'll fit them, or and basically I've noticed a lot of films nominated for this or that win this category are often films that have a lot of like background extra characters, and assuming
Oh
that they're
yeah.
not CGI, and usually they're not, that usually requires a lot more effort on the costume designer's part to design and create enough period authentic costumes to put them in. So I think
Well, well, yeah. As Tom O'Neill keeps saying, that in order to win, you gotta have the most of something, like the most costumes, the most elaborate win best costume design.
or just where costumes are front and center, basically.
Oh yeah.
So
Uh huh. Yes, and not to mention that Consolata Boyle did get, well, she's a previous two-time nominee for The Queen, and Florence Foster Jenkins, both also directed by Stephen Frears.
well, darkest hour. Oh yeah, you're something of Victorian Abdul. Sorry. um,
Well, yeah,
but
well, Jacqueline Duran, who, well, I mean, it's because it seems likely Jacqueline Duran will receive at least one nomination for costume design. I mean, she could even receive two, as she's costume designer on both Darkest Hour and Beauty and the Beast.
mhm. um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, well, we'll see. I mean, it's I just I'm just going with, just I guess, based on more recent films, because recent films always tend to do better in these categories anyway, no, regardless of how well they do overall in terms of the bigger categories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now on to best film editing. The current lineup I have is Dunkirk, The Shape of Water, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, Get Out, and Blade Runner 2049.
All right, I have Dunkirk, Baby Driver, The Shape of Water, Get Out, and Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri.
Hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, well, I can definitely see Baby Driver being possible, but however, since the expansion of the Best Picture nominees, only two films have gone for film editing without a Best Picture nomination, which were Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which won, and Star Wars: The Force Awakens.
True, but quite often you'll have, if you look at the history of best film editing, you'll have a lot of films that have like action scenes in them, particularly action scenes involving cars, that not only get nominated for this category but win it. So,
Well,
for
yes, but
instance,
that was before the number of Best Picture nominees expanded.
right, but I'm just saying that it's the actual film editors who nominate this category.
Well,
So
yes, I'm not saying
they're
it's
not,
out. I'm not saying it's out of the question. I agree; it's still possible.
I'm just saying that, they're going to, since, and many of these film editors are, long time veterans who've been working for decades, and maybe even worked on some of these movies, depending on how many are still alive. Many of them, when they look at a film like Baby Driver, they're going to think about films like Bullet or The French Connection, or scrolling down here,
Speed
Speed, yes, and
or the
The
Bourne
Bourne
Ultimatum.
Ultimatum, which all won this category. And they're going to, and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which had some car chase scenes, although certainly that's not the main theme of that movie. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't think usually when they're looking into this, they're not like saying, all right, how, I don't think when they're looking at Baby Driver, they're not going to decide, they're not looking at its chances of being nominated for Best Picture. They're just looking at how is the editing in this film shot,
Or
because
done, but
because
but
too often because too often action films these days, especially action films involving a lot of car chases, usually resort to shaky cam, or just a lot of quick cuts, and just a very choppy feel overall. And I feel that editors may want to send a message by nominating Baby Driver and saying, "Hey, see, this is how you do it. So do it
well,
more like this. Then you'll get some respect."
yes, but then again, could the fact that Kevin Spacey has a small supporting role in Baby Driver turn some Academy members away from even watching it?
Uh, Possibly, but I have a strong feeling voters who probably wanted to see Baby Driver would have already seen it before
Well, yeah,
Kevin
because
Spacey's allegations because it was a hit at the box office, and the general encouragement of Academy members is for them to go to the movies as often as possible throughout the year and not just wait for the studios to send them the screeners because you don't want the worst thing you can do is just try and cram in as many movies as possible at once before you make your vote because if you see more movies throughout the year and you see them in a more spread out way then you'll have a better sense of what you like and what you don't like.
Mhm.
So
Well,
I just think the past history of this category and who's voting on it and how they vote will make Baby Driver a pretty big contender, at least in this category, which is why I have it ranked so high. Because quite often with film editing, regardless if your film is a Best Picture winner or not, they want a
or
lot
even a
of,
nominee.
right, but regardless of whether or not it's a nominee for Best Picture, then to win Best Film Editing, you need to have not necessarily a lot of action, but just a lot of fast-paced scenes that are cut together very well and don't drag the movie down or just give it even or if it's a slower movie like say The Social Network, give it like a feel that doesn't make you feel bored or make you wonder when's this going to end. It's got to be like quick quick quick, like snap your fingers and there it is.
Hmm. Well, yeah, that's well part of that is the reason why while I do have Blade Runner 2049 getting in, reason I think it might be vulnerable is that I heard people thought it might have been too long, which of course might have led to its box office failure.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean I was planning to put in Blade Runner 2049, but then I realized that I had no more room. So, because I mean, best picture contenders always do very well here, but there's always like one outlier film that may not be in best picture, but certainly was received a lot of praise for its editing, and Baby Driver is that film because there's no way Baby Driver is going to get a best picture nomination. Although I know a lot of people who would want it to get a best picture nomination because they're like huge Edgar Wright fans and they think it's his best movie to date. But yeah, I just think that, as long as you have a lot of well-paced action, that is cut together very well and is backed up with an overall solid story, you have a good chance of getting nominated.
Well, yes, but like I said, again, not that I'm discounting Baby Driver in this category entirely. I'm just saying that it's worth noting that only two films that were nominated for Best Picture since the expansion of nominees in that category have been nominated for film editing.
Right, but you there's always but there's always a chance for a couple more to get in there.
Well, we shall see. But in any case, now on to Best Makeup and Hairstyling, which still has three nominees. I have no idea why, and well, I'm not sure anyone has any idea why. But in any case, so read off your rankings.
I thought it's your turn this time.
Oh, is oh no, I believe you read off costume design. Then I believe I read
Oh,
off
right.
film it. Yeah,
Okay,
it's your
yeah,
turn.
yeah. So right now I have Darkest Hour, Wonder, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Okay, I have the same top two, except I have I, Tanya taking the third slot.
And I came very close to putting that in there, but then I realized in pretty much almost every year that there's always at least a lot of, uh, if your film has a lot of prosthetics or a lot of face paint, then you pretty much are guaranteed to get a nomination.
Well, yes, like the first Guardians of the Galaxy did get in for makeup a few years ago, and though I mean, I guess maybe if there were five slots as there should be, I would probably be predicting it.
Right, but I mean, if you just look at starting with 2010, I mean, you have, in terms of either face paint or heavy prosthetics, you have The Wolf Man, which ended up winning. Then you have in 2011, you had Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2.
The
Then,
Iron Lady one.
Right, I know. I'm just talking about nominations. Well, if they win, I'll mention that. And then in 2012, you had as a nominee The Hobbit and Unexpected Journey. Then
And Hitchcock.
2004, right? Oh, yeah, that had prosthetics for Anthony Hopkins. Then in 2014, you had Guardians of the Galaxy, and then with Foxcatcher, you had Steve Carell and his fake nose. Then in
And
2000,
in 2013, you had the Lone Ranger.
right? Oh, and of course, Bad Grandpa, because Johnny Knoxville plays the bad grandpa, and he's definitely not an old man.
Hmm.
Then in Mad Max Fury Road, then 2015, you had Mad Max Fury Road, which had people in face paint, and then the 100-year-old man who climbed out of the window and disappeared, where you had an actor who was like 50 play a 100-year-old man. Then, of course, last year you had Suicide Squad controversially winning, and then Star Trek Beyond, which should have won, and but because you have the more factor, like Tom O'Neill says, you have the more face paint, the more prosthetics, the more makeup and hairstyling in general.
Well, yes, but given that the nominations in this category is voted on by a peer group, I mean, they're probably not gonna look at most. They're just gonna vote for what they thought did the best work.
Right, but I think but I think they also like to look for the work that takes the most effort to do, and these are the three that take up the most. If there were 5 slots, I do think I Tanya would get in there, along with maybe Bright for the fifth spot, just out of the ones that they had eligible. Although in terms of others, that were not eligible but should have been, it would have been nice to see it be eligible for this category
Hmm.
because of what they did with Bill Skarsgård's makeup, because that was pretty incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, I definitely think Guardians of the Galaxy is still possible, but we shall see. So now on to production design. It's now my turn to read off my rankings first. And I currently have The Shape of Water, Blade Runner 2049, Dunkirk, Darkest Hour, and Beauty and the Beast.
All right. I have The Shape of Water, Blade Runner 2049, Beauty and the Beast, Dunkirk, and The Post.
Oh, yeah, I had the post. Yeah, I could see the post getting in. It's by the legendary Rick Carter, who's won 2 Oscars for Avatar and Lincoln, and and I guess I have Beauty and the Beast ranked last. Well, because these fairy tale movies, they usually only get in for costume design, but not production design. I mean, Into the Woods is definitely an exception to that rule.
Well, Alice in Wonderland won the Oscar for production design.
And costume design, that's right, yeah. Well, is Alice in Wonderland really a fairy tale?
It's considered. I guess you could say so, because Disney is Disney adapted it. So, and
Well,
some
yeah,
people,
but that doesn't make it a fairy tale. Like the Jungle Book, is that a fairy tale? Because Grace Randolph often keeps referring to them as live action fairy tales, when not all of them are really fairy tales.
no, but I guess, but I don't know. They just often been treated like fairy tales, basically, because they involve things like magic and fantasy, and But the point is that's we're talking about. I guess a better way to describe it would be live action remakes of animated Disney films.
Well, yes, even though I'm not sure if Alice in Wonderland was necessarily, well, had any connections with the 1951 cartoon, it was just more treated more as a sequel to Lewis Carroll's story.
Right, but I'm just saying Disney made both the original animated Alice in Wonderland and this live
Well,
action one.
remakes or reboots.
Right, but the point is they were all made by the same company. That's
Yes,
that's
but
that's
but
the point
but
here.
again, they usually only gotten in for costume design. Like, well, with the exception of Alice in Wonderland, only they usually only get in for costume design, like Cinderella, Maleficent, and of course Into the Woods gotten for both production design and costume design. And again, while I do have Beauty and the Beast getting in, still the fact that these and other fairy tale movies like Mirror, Mirror, and Snow White and the Huntsman, those both only gotten for costume design.
Mhm. But I think also a big factor, and you haven't mentioned this, is I think also the general critical consensus can also play a big factor into this, because films like Alice in Wonderland and Maleficent didn't really get the best reviews. They only got more mixed reviews, whereas films like Cinderella and The Jungle Book, they got much more positive reception, and Beauty and the Beast is like a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes last time I checked. But
Yeah.
I think it has a stronger chance, and I have it ranked higher than you of it getting nominated, because it has the more factor. It's very ornate, it's very lavish, it's very you
Well,
know
yes, yes. Though in my in the hangout I did yesterday, I believe Riley Charles said as he was watching that film, he wasn't sure if it was all practical or if some of it was CGI.
well, I've watched like the behind the scenes B-rolls that they do, and for the most part, for what I see, most of it is pretty practical. I mean, yeah, there might be like a few green screen hangings in the background, but it's not like as if it's all green screen being shot in a studio. I mean,
Yeah,
they
like the
did,
Star Wars prequels.
right. I mean, they did construct, like, if you look at the behind the scenes video, they did construct like an actual set for the Beast's castle and for the Belle's village, and so like a lot of what we're seeing on screen is real, and given the fact that the film cost, I think 170, I don't know what the budget was, but they obviously they obviously used a lot of money on the film, not just for the effects, but for everything else. So, and I
Well,
just
yeah,
think
though I
the
will say from the photos and some video I've seen, they clearly should have given Belle a much better ball gown than what she got.
I I mean I liked it for the most part. I mean, it's hard to recreate, an iconic dress that was,
Well,
created
yes, but I've
by a
seen stage
generation.
productions of Beauty and the Beast that did it much better.
Well, but then again, I guess they were in the stage productions. They want to dazzle people, But I mean, like, look what, maybe it was from me seeing on an IMAX screen, but I thought her dress was quite gorgeous, actually. Would I say it's as iconic as the animated dress? No, because it's hard to be top anything that iconic. But for what they did do, it worked really well. And I just think the basically, if your set has to be nominated, at least if your set's not going to be like futuristic or apocalyptic, then it has to be like really nice and ornate and beautiful. And and Beauty and the Beast certainly falls into that category, because with Dunkirk, while I think it'll be nominated because of the track record of other war films getting nominated here, I I have it
And
ranked
the fact
lower
that it's
because,
Nathan Crowley.
but I'm just saying the fact I have it ranked lower because I don't know. I mean, a lot of what they had was already there in terms of what they had of the beaches they were using, and a lot of other things. So I don't know necessarily how much retrofitting they had to do to make it look, like it was the 1940s. So, but then I have The Post in fifth place because I think, given that All the President's Men was nominated here and won, and
Yeah.
that was, and they have to, and that was considered a pretty contemporary film at the time it came out, because it came out only 4 years after the Watergate scandal, and this, of course, is set before Watergate. But given the fact that now they're having to go back 40 years and recreate everything to make it look fresh and make it look
Especially within such a short amount of time.
right. So, the fact that they're making it look fresh and the fact that it's a real location, I think that could certainly help it out a lot, with like, yeah, I mean, because this category is always interesting because you'll always have your mix of best picture contenders as well as films that aren't best picture contenders, but the
And
sets are
sometimes
the best.
contemporary pieces like Arrival and La La Land last year.
Right. But then again, in those films, they had elements in it to make them stand out for their production design, because most contemporary set films don't really stand out in terms of their production design.
Hmm.
It often has
Yes.
to do with the setting of the movie, because in La La Land you have the fantasy settings during like the dream ballet sequence, whereas Arrival you have the inside of the alien spaceship, which I think played a huge factor in that getting a nomination.
Mhm. So now on to best score.
Okay, so I have The Shape of Water, Dunkirk, Phantom Thread, Blade Runner 2049, and Star Wars The Last Jedi.
Okay, I have most of those same rankings, except I have John Williams getting in twice here for The Post and The Last Jedi.
Mm-hmm. I don't really think he's going to get him for The Post because, I mean, the music in that film, I mean, it's good music, but it's not like it's the driving force of the film, because in all these other films, it feels like the music is just as much of a character as the characters themselves. Because when you look at what often is nominated here from the past, it's often films where the music is in itself a character, because it feels like the music helps define the story just as much as the writing and the directing do. And I feel like with these films that I have here, including Star Wars, I feel that the music in those films could easily be their own character with their own traits, their own personalities, and everything. And plus,
Well,
the fact that John Williams has been nominated for many Star Wars films in the past, and he was nominated recently for The Force Awakens a couple years ago.
and I'm not sure if he was nominated for any of the prequels.
He might. I know he wasn't nominated for the last two, but let me check real quick. Could have been nominated for Phantom Menace, although I'm not sure.
No, I don't think he was. I'm looking it up right now. But again, you've mentioned he was nominated for Force Awakens. Well, even that score got mixed reviews. Like some people thought, like I know Chris Stuckman felt the score for Force Awakens felt rushed.
Yeah, I didn't feel that way at all. Chris Stuckman, sometimes he has, I don't know, I think he's one of those Star Wars fans that's just way too nitpicky. Like he was all with his Rogue One analysis, and I use that term questionably. He was basically saying people who like Rogue One are just lying to themselves because they know it sucks. I'm like, really?
Yes, Phantom Menace did not get nominated for score.
Nope. Yeah, no. I knew he was nominated for something, but it was actually for Angela's Ashes.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, and not to mention that I should also point out that Williams has been a double nominee in this category before. Last time being in 2011 for The Adventures of Tintin and Warhorse.
Mm-hmm. But I just think that I don't know. I mean, with really a lack of, I mean, precursor nominations certainly help in this category, but I just think with a lack of precursor nominations for the Post, at least in this category, I think that could hurt its chances here. And I think that with like Star Wars coming out recently and having like the big epic music for the battle sequences, that was, I think, could play a major factor. And hold on, I gotta give my dog another bone because if I don't give him one, he's just gonna keep whining and barking.
Mm-hmm. So, yes. So in any case, those are my rankings. I have John Williams getting in twice. I have Johnny Greenwood getting in for Phantom Thread. I have Hans Zimmer getting in for Dunkirk and Alexandra Desplat for The Shape of Water. Though I could see Blade Runner 2049 getting in, making Hans Zimmer the double nominee, even though for Blade Runner 2049 he'd be a co-nominee with Benjamin Wellfish. And I should also, and I guess another possibility could be Thomas Newman for Victoria and Abdul, given that the Academy loves to nominate him even if they never want to give him an Oscar. Like, they even nominated him last year for Passengers, despite the fact that that film, well, no one was really crazy about that movie at all. So if and when Alex gets back, hopefully we can really resume here. So who knows how long he's taking. But so
all right, I'm back.
Okay, great. Yes, in fact, as I was finishing while you were gone, I was telling the viewers that, yes, Blade Runner 2049 is definitely a possibility, which means not only would Hans Zimmer be a double nominee here, but he also shared the Blade Runner nomination with Benjamin Wellfish.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, in fact, another possibility, I guess we should probably keep an eye out for a nomination here is Victoria and Abdul, given that's by Thomas Newman, who, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. He was nominated the last 2 years for Bridge of Spies and last year for Passengers.
Mm-hmm. Or Dario Marianelli for Darkest Hour. Some people have
Right.
been picking him.
Well, yeah, and he's a previous winner for Atonement, another Joe Wright's film.
Yep. Uh, hmm.
Yeah. So I guess, are you ready to discuss the original song category?
Sure.
Okay, and now, is it your turn or my turn?
Uh, hold on.
Mm,
I think it's yours because I didn't. I announced mine for makeup and score first.
yeah, okay. So my current rankings are Remember Me from Coco, This Is Me from The Greatest Showman, Mighty River from Mudbound, Stand Up for Something from Marshall, and Evermore from Beauty and the Beast.
All right. Well, I currently have Remember Me from Coco, This Is Me from The Greatest Showman, Evermore from Beauty and the Beast, The Mystery of Love from Call Me by Your Name, and Stand Up for Something from Marshall.
Hmm. Okay, and I guess my reasoning for the rankings I have, like, I guess a few reasons why I have Evermore in last place is that, well, that song has, I guess somewhat of a mixed response because while there were some people who thought it was a nice addition, there are other people who thought it seemed a little forced. Like, I mean, as much as we can all disagree or disagree with Jeremy Johns. I mean, I remember in his review, he thought the song seemed a little too much. Because I guess a tricky thing about making musicals work on the big screen is that, well, films are more show don't tell medium where you don't always even need dialogue to understand what's going on. Like, he thought that moment the cartoon was executed better since there was no song, they just cut to the chase.
Mm. Well, I, I guess I have it higher just simply because it's Alan Menken and Tim Rice, since they've all they've won this category several times in the past. Menken won 8 times, Rice won 3 times, and of course, well, yeah, and they even won together for A Whole New World from Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
I just think their overall history and just their love from the music branch of the Academy I mean, could help them at least get a nomination and possibly give them a chance to upset, because I think that the song itself, I mean, I really like the song, and I think I could see some voters liking how it gives the Beast an added depth to his character.
Well, at least in the live action film, because in the Broadway musical, he had his own ballad called If I Can't Love Her, which ended Act One. And of course, that song didn't end up getting used in the live action film, well, for the reason it was placed, well, I guess because it just wouldn't have worked as well in its place it would have ended up.
Hmm. But then I have the Mystery of Love in here just because the Academy likes having, well established singer songwriters in here. We've had a lot of, really big names win this category, like Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, Lionel Richie, Phil
Sam,
Collins.
Sam Smith, Adele, John Legend, Common.
Hmm. But then we've also had, musicians who have, a lot of critical acclaim and a devoted following, but not necessarily a huge mainstream appeal. Probably most notably in recent years, Ryan Bingham, who won for The Weary Kind from the Crazy Heart, and The Mystery of Love from Call Me by Your Name. It's written and performed by Sufjan Stevens, who has never really had a lot of mainstream appeal, but then again, he's never really tried to have mainstream appeal because he doesn't try to fit the typical pop music mold. He likes to do more stripped down acoustic and intimate songs. That's what's been the big theme of his music, and he's been releasing music since like the late 90s, I believe. So he's been around for a long time, and he's always received like a lot of critical acclaim for knowing how to write really emotional songs.
Yes, and although there's another song in contention from Call Me by Your Name, which could split the vote in nominations.
True, but I think that given the fact that Mystery of Love has literally been used in the trailers, could also help increase its chances of getting nominated, especially if like Academy voters are going to the movie theater and they see a trailer for Call Me by Your Name in front of whatever movie they're playing.
Well, yes, although the other song, I believe it's Visions of Light, is it?
Visions of Gideon, I think.
Oh
it's
yeah,
called.
Visions of the Gideon. Yes, that plays over the final shot of the film, and not to mention, I know some people probably prefer that song. Like I know Kevin Jacobson especially.
Mm-hmm. But if Academy voters want snob appeal, they'll probably go for Sufjan Stevens because, if I can imagine many of them probably hate a lot of today's pop stars like Miley Cyrus and Justin Bieber and One Direction and all of that, and they'll like to show their superior musical tastes, and also let's not forget that quite a lot of well-known musicians, particularly the ones who've won in this category, and also several who may have never been nominated for an Oscar, but who are confirmed members, like Eric Clapton is a confirmed member of the music branch, for instance. There's a very good chance that a lot of them will be familiar with Sufjan Stevens' work, because I'm sure they could find a lot to admire in his music. So I think for them in particular, since they would want to see like an actual person who writes his own songs and plays his own instruments, probably be nominated. So
Yes, and of course, then I have Stand Up for Something King, and very much because it's written by Common, previous winner for Selma, and of course, Always the Bride, another Always the Bridesmaid and Never the Bride, Diane Warren, who I guess also has a nomination herself for that song from Christ from Syria.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's that reason for why I have it in here, and also for the reason that it got nominated at the Grammys in their Best Song for Visual Media category, because that category always kind of has an overlap with the Oscars in terms of nominations. But of course, with the Grammys, it's always a little different every year because of the fact that the Grammy eligibility is from October 2016 to September 2017. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I'd like to point out that's another reason why I have Evermore ranked lower, because the soundtrack for Live Action Beauty and Beast did not receive any Grammy nominations for its eligibility period, while, yes, and it also didn't get in at the Globes, which not that matters too much, but still, it does have me, that did play into my thinking of where to place it.
Mm-hmm. But it did get nominated at the Critics' Choice Awards, and the Critics' Choice often has a pretty good knack for predicting what the Oscars will eventually go for in terms of Best Original Song, not only with the nominations, but also the win.
Well, yes, which is why Remember Me still in the conversation despite its Golden Globe loss.
Right, but then again, the Golden Globes have a track record of just kind of going for the more popular rather than the actual more deserving.
Well, yes, even though they have correctly predicted the song winner for the last 3 years.
True, but I don't think it's going to happen again in this case, because at the very least.
Well, yeah, because that might have been a case where we're already going to give Coco a feature, but we want to spread the wealth, and since Grace Shulman is up for Best Comedy Musical, we'll throw into it here.
Yeah. Well, plus, quite a lot of the time, they like to have the Best Original Song winner come from, at the very least, a decent film. I mean, nominations-wise, you could have it be all over the place, because let's not forget 50 Shades of Grey got nominated for Best Original Song, and that film was just destroyed by critics.
Yes, and 50 Shades Darker could get in here again.
Right, and that film has an even lower rating, like 9 or 10%, and 50 Shades of Grey had like a 25%. So, all right, hold on. My dogs are at it again. I'm gonna have to actually feed them dinner early just so that they'll leave me alone.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so while he's doing that, I guess go for, I guess, in fact, I should probably recommend that if you have not seen Musical Hell's Know the Score video on Beauty and Beast, she gives a very interesting, I guess, analysis, especially compare and contrast some of the additional songs from both the Broadway show and the live-action remakes. So it's interesting to see, especially when she gets in over the Beast songs like If I Can't Love Her to Evermore. It's pretty interesting. I highly recommend you check it out. So hopefully Alex will be back soon. And as soon as he gets back, we're definitely going to go over the sound categories, because I think it'll be time to start there. And I hope you don't mind, but I've been getting pretty hungry, so I just thought now or never. Should be back any minute now. Oh, it sounds like he's coming back. Well, any second now.
All right, I'm back.
Okay, are you ready to discuss the sound categories?
Yep.
All right, so best sound editing, what's your rankings?
Dunkirk, Star Wars The Last Jedi, Baby Driver, Blade Runner 2049, and Wonder Woman.
Okay. Baby Driver and Wonder Woman are definitely possibilities in this category, though my current rankings are Dunkirk, The Last Jedi, Blade Runner 2049, The Shape of Water, and War for the Planet of the Apes.
Well, I just have a strong feeling about Baby Driver getting in here because, you know, a lot of it involves car chases, and those are always very popular in the sound categories. But I think Wonder Woman could possibly get in here because, you know, I and many others assumed it would probably be running for best visual effects, but then it didn't make the semifinalists, so its chances there are gone. But you know, sound editing and mixing, war films are always big here, whether it's real life war films or fantasy war films. You know, so given the fact that Wonder Woman is primarily centered around World War One, I think, and I've heard a lot about the epic No Man's Land sequence in the film. I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard a lot about it, and many people saying it's the best thing about the movie. So I think that in particular, and given the fact that Wonder Woman became a much bigger cultural phenomenon than anyone thought it would be, because I think many people were expecting it to fail because of the DCEU's previous track record with Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, and Suicide Squad. So I think, I think voters are going to want to at least give Wonder Woman some kind of love, because if they're not going to give it a Best Picture nomination or a Best Actress nomination for Gal Gadot or a Best Director nomination for Patty Jenkins, then they're going to want to give it at least one or two craft nominations, because I think, I think most people, given that superhero films are so popular with audiences, they're always getting high numbers at the box office. And even though we kind of know they're not going to get nominated for the top categories, we always expect them to maybe get at least a few technical nominations. So, so yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, I've always noticed there's always at least one or two discrepancies between sound editing and sound mixing. It's very rare that you have the exact same lineup of 5 for both, because obviously the sound branch who nominates these, they obviously know the true difference between sound editing and sound mixing, and so therefore that's kind of why we might see one film get a sound editing nomination but not sound mixing, and vice versa.
Yes.
It's quite often I notice, like, a lot of best sound editing will often have nominees in which all the nominees are like films that have either a lot of action or a lot of danger or something like that. Whereas with best sound mixing, like 4 of the 5 will be the same nominees of sound editing, but then you'll have one film which might be more quiet and more subtle, like Bridge of Spies, for instance.
Or Lincoln.
Mm-hmm. Or it's another one. I can't think of it at the top of my head.
Well, La La Land, to some extent, besides its musical numbers.
But that's a musical, so...
I know, I'm saying besides its musical numbers, it's actually a very quiet film.
Right, hold on, let me just look this up real quick, because I think I can find the film I'm thinking of. See.
Well, in any case...
okay, I see it. The King's Speech got a sound editing
nomination. Yeah, that's right.
And so did
The Social Network?
Oh yeah, that, and well, that's not the one I was thinking of. Where is it? Oh, Memoirs of a Geisha got a sound mixing nomination.
Right, and that was one of many losses for Kevin O'Connell.
Right, and what else? Oh, Amelie got a sound mixing nomination,
Oh,
and so did well, there's one last one. The Green Mile got a sound mixing nomination, and that's definitely not an action film. Uh, see, Forrest Gump got a sound mixing nomination,
mm-hmm.
and so did A Few Good Men and JFK. And last one, let me find it. Uh, where is it? Oh yeah, Out of Africa won sound mixing against Back to the Future, A Chorus Line, Lady Hawk, and Silverado.
Wow.
And yeah, and Amadeus beat out. Oh,
Well, Amadeus has the music in it.
true. Well, no, that's not the right one I was thinking of. Where I'd have to go back further to find it. Well, but anyways, my point being is that there are a lot of films that you would not think would get nominated for a category like sound mixing that do get nominated.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think The Shape of Water falls into that because, well, yeah, you might have the sound effects for Doug Jones's Creature. Other than that, The Shape of Water is not like any other film you would expect to be nominated for the sound category.
Well, yes, even though, like you mentioned, it has happened several times before.
Right. So I'm going off like previous history to kind of go for that. And when you do have the one outlier that's not like the other nominees, it's almost always a film that's probably nominated for Best Picture,
Mm-hmm.
with like the notable exception being Amelie.
Yeah, our Fight Club that also was up for sound mixing, editing at least.
Right, but then again, that film, the title Fight Club, could kind of was going to help it get a nomination anyway.
True. So yeah. So as for now on to sound mixing, my current rankings are Dunkirk.
I,
The
I
last. I'm sorry.
no, I thought we just did sound mixing.
No, that was editing.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So for sound mixing, I have Dunkirk, The Last Jedi, The Shape of Water, Baby Driver, and Blade Runner 2049.
All right. So I have Dunkirk, Star Wars: The Last Jedi, Baby Driver, Blade Runner 2049, and The Shape of Water.
Okay, so even though it's in different rankings, we at least got the same 5 films in contention.
Yep.
Okay, so now on to best visual effects, your rankings.
Okay. So for right now, I have War for the Planet of the Apes in first place, then Star Wars: The Last Jedi, Blade Runner 2049, The Shape of Water, and I'm taking a big risk with this one, but I think it may have a chance just because it is visual effects after all. Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets.
Wow. I mean, that's we shall see how you do there. I mean, as for my rankings, well, even though I have Shape of Water in first place right now, I am wavering given that it did not get in at the Visual Effects Guild. So it should be interesting. I mean, again, I'm just basing on my rules that, if you have a Best Picture nominee in contention for visual effects, that usually tends to win.
Yeah, but quite often though we've seen a lot of films that have no Best Picture nominations still win anyway because I think
Well,
what the,
I meant, well, up against the Best Picture nominee. Like we saw that with Ex Machina. Well, then again, there were 3 Best Picture nominees in that category that year, so they all pretty much canceled each other out.
right, but then you had but then you had Interstellar win, and well, none of the nominees that year had a Best Picture nomination, but Interstellar won that year, and basically, if you look at the history of the
I,
category,
I'm
particularly,
sorry.
I mean, I guess if you look at the history of the category, you want the effects that, at least out of the nominations, you have look the most realistic and don't look like so obvious that you can tell they're visual effects, because, when you look at films that have won, you've had all three of the Star Wars, the original Star Wars trilogy, all won, and then you had films like Aliens and The Abyss, and then Babe, Titanic, all three Lord of the Rings films.
Well, yes, and I should point out, yeah, but yes, but in years where there's a film up for Best Picture in contention for visual effects, that usually tends to win, like we saw with Forrest Gump winning over The Mask and True Lies. Babe, well, there were two Best Picture nominees in visual effects that year, which were Babe and Apollo 13, and Babe won. Titanic won. I'm sorry?
But I also think that a big part of whether or not it wins is how realistic the effects are. Because if
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Because if the effects look pretty realistic, then where it looks like you can't really tell what's real and what's not, then I think that usually gets the most respect from the voters, because you have all the vote because you have all the voters voting, even though it's just the visual effects department that picks the nominees.
Well,
so I mean, and with The Shape of Water, you could, one thing that some voters might not vote for it is that they might feel there's not really a lot of visual effects in it to vote for.
Then again, they're also a curious case of Benjamin Button won visual effects over Dark Knight and Iron Man. Hugo won over Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Right, but then again, in those films, they did more, I guess, they did more effects that while they were, you knew that they were effects based on the situation in the film. Like with Hugo, there's a scene of a train derailing, which obviously they wouldn't be able to do in real life. I think like things like that kind of can help, give momentum towards a win in terms of making things that didn't seem possible to put in real life look like they were done in real life. But in this case, I think War for the Planet of the Apes might have the best chance of winning as of right now, just because there might be the consensus that it's time to let one of the films win, because both time with the other two films, they were both kind of considered frontrunners, because Hugo was considered quite an upset when it won over Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and then while Interstellar was always the frontrunner for 2014, there was some talk that Dawn of the Planet of the Apes could possibly pull an upset, but
all five nominees for visual effects that year, Interstellar seemed to have the most snob appeal, as in it seemed like it could have been a Best Picture nominee any other year, as well as the fact that at least of the films in contention that year, it had the most nominations.
Right. But I also think that, I guess, they want to look for something that's the most plausible, or like the most effort, I guess, to make it look seamless, because obviously with the visual effects for the Planet of the Apes franchise, they've had to do more and more of them with each new film, as like there's more and more apes to deal with in different environments. But I also do think we could possibly see an upset for Star Wars The Last Jedi, simply because all assumed that it would either go to Mad Max Fury Road or Star Wars The Force Awakens 2 years ago, and it didn't. So if people
they owe Star Wars a visual effects Oscar.
Yeah, they may feel that at least one of the new films should at least win something.
Mm-hmm.
So far, none of the new films have won anything.
Yes, and as for the rest of my rankings, I mentioned I have Shape of Water, as well as Star Wars The Last Jedi, War for the Planet of the Apes, Blade Runner 2049, and Dunkirk.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was going back and forth between Dunkirk and Valerian, but since Christopher Nolan wanted like almost everything in Dunkirk to be practical, that maybe could possibly hurt it if they want at least some kind of CGI in there. But I have Valerian in here mainly because there's always at least a few films each year which may have not gotten the best reviews from critics, but certainly spent a lot of money in terms of making the visual effects stand out, I guess, although not always to the greatest degree. But even though Valerian, in my opinion, was just a meh movie, it had potential. There was a lot of good things about it. The best thing being the visual effects and like the costume design and alien and makeup design for the aliens. that would have been a great nominee for best makeup and hairstyling. Now that I think about it, but even though the film's story wasn't all that great, the visual effects were quite spectacular. So they spent the money well on that. It's just too bad they couldn't make a better story to go with it. And I feel that if we allow Transformers films to get visual effects nominations, then why not this film too? Because this film, even though the reviews aren't that great, it's basically a masterpiece compared to Transformers, especially the last two Transformers films, which have gotten the lowest ratings yet, I think, out of all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I should also, I should also point out. Well, I don't know what goes to members' minds, well, of the visual effects branch when voting on nominations, whether how much, if they take practicality into account, because I could see the lack of CGI, but more reliance on practicality helping Dunkirk to that extent.
Mm-hmm. But usually, even the most subtle winners of visual effects, like Forrest Gump and The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, did have to use CGI, but they used it in such a seamless way that you couldn't really tell the difference between what was CGI and what was real.
And an inventive way as well.
True. So I think, if you go just completely practical and not really add anything to it, then, voters might be thinking, well, then what's the point of even nominating it if there's nothing you had to do to trick us into thinking it was real when it was not?
Oh, I'm not saying Dunkirk could win visual effects. At least a nomination.
Right, but I don't know. But just in terms of it being completely 100% practical effects, I don't know how that will help it be nominated, because even Star Wars The Force Awakens, which used a lot of practical effects, had to use CGI for some things.
Well, yes, and The Revenant was also nominated that year.
Right, because they used a CGI bear.
Well, yes, and also had to use green screen in some cases.
Yeah, because of them always having to move around to find a good location to film in with enough snow. But but I think because if The Revenant if they had done the crazy thing of using an actual bear, it probably wouldn't have been nominated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure if it were Daniel Day-Lewis in that role instead of Leonardo DiCaprio, I'm sure he would have insisted on using a real bear.
Yeah. So
because Daniel Day-Lewis has done some crazy things, like he literally learned how to skin animals when making Last of the Mohicans, and when he was doing Gangs in New York, he insisted on wearing his costume 24/7, even in really cold weather, to the point where he got pneumonia.
Yeah. So, in any case, I guess now on to the final 6 awards. First being animated feature.
Okay. Is it my turn?
It might be my turn. Yeah, because I think I started with the song nominees, then you took over for sound editing, then I did sound mixing, you did visual effects.
Well, then because I know some of the categories I didn't: makeup, score, sound editing. Okay, yeah, then it would be your turn.
All right, for anime feature, the rankings I have now are Coco, Loving Vincent, The Breadwinner, the Lego Batman movie, and Mary and the Witch's Flower.
I have the same nominees, just in a different order.
Okay, what's your rankings?
Coco, The Breadwinner, Loving Vincent, the Lego Batman movie, and Mary and the Witch's Flower.
Well, yeah, and Coco is the only one of the potential nominees I've actually seen, so I can't really comment on why I have the rest of the rankings the way they are. I mean, I guess just what I've been hearing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I've seen Coco, Loving Vincent, and the Lego Batman movie. I haven't seen The Breadwinner, but given the fact that it's about a young girl who has to disguise herself as a boy, and she lives in Afghanistan so she can get a job to support her family, I could see how that could appeal to a lot of voters, especially in light of the Me Too movement. I mean, obviously, this is not about sexual harassment or anything, this movie, but it certainly draws attention to the fact that, in the Middle East, women and girls are still treated like second-class citizens and don't have the same rights and opportunities that men do.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, yes, and oh, I'm sorry.
So that and then Loving Vincent I have in third just because of the concept of the movie. Basically a movie. I guess it was shot in live action, but then redone entirely with oil paintings. I think they
Oh,
had over 100 oil painters paint every single shot, and
uh,
it looks fantastic. I've seen it on the big screen, and
I guess now I have a good excuse for leaving it in second place.
mhm. But then the Lego Batman movie, I know there was the debate of can it still be nominated given that it was snubbed at the Annie Awards, which is pretty surprising given that the Lego Batman movie got way better reviews than, say, The Boss Baby or Despicable Me 3, which got
Well,
Annie nominations. But
yeah. Plus, the Academy also owes the Lego an Oscar nomination after snubbing the Lego Movie for animated feature.
right, and well, that's the main one of the reasons why I think it'll be here, and another is I think that now that the entire Academy can nominate Best Animated Feature in the nominations phase, if a lot of Academy members who like say have young children, they probably ended up taking them to see this movie or probably bought it on DVD for them. So
Hmm.
chances are they probably had to watch it with their kids several times by now.
Hmm.
But it's one of those family friendly animated movies that's actually a good movie, and it's not like, oh, I just have to sit through this.
Like the
It's
Emoji Movie.
right. Well, in the Emoji Movie, that's the rare case where like no one liked it. Like Ferdinand is a movie that kids will love, but adults will probably just be like, oh God. Especially with Kate McKinnon's annoying goat character.
Yeah.
And some people, yeah. But yeah, so yeah, that's I think why it'll be nominated here. And then Mary and the Witch's Flower, there's always at least one anime film in this category every year, and usually it's an anime film that, when it comes to the dubbed English voice cast, for the Western world release, they always like to get really big names attached to the film. And in the case of Mary and the Witch's Flower, some of the voices they have for the dubbed English version include Kate Winslet, Jim Broadbent, and Ruby Barnhill from the BFG.
Hmm, interesting.
Because if you look at other films that were nominated in the past, like The Tale of the Princess Kaguya had cast members like Chloe Grace Moretz and James Caan, and then films like The Wind Rises, the English voice cast for that movie included people like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Emily Blunt, and Mandy Patinkin.
Well, yes, and Spirited Away, and Howl's Moving Castle.
Yep, and what there's yeah.
When Marnie was there.
Oh yeah, that had Haley Steinfeld in that for the English language version.
Mm. Yeah. So I guess now on to best documentary feature.
All right. And this will be interesting because, this is always a wild card category because a lot of times things we predict will get nominated don't, and things we didn't think we'd get nominated do. But for right now, I'm predicting Jane, Faces Places, Icarus, An Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power, and LA 92.
Okay, my rankings right now are Jane, Faces Places, City of Ghosts, Icarus, and Last Man in Alpipio.
Aleppo?
In Aleppo, yes.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I was going to consider putting City of Ghosts in here because it's by the same filmmakers who directed the Oscar nominee Cartel Land, but given that both City of Ghosts and Last Men in Aleppo both deal with the situation in Syria, I could see them canceling each other out because I could see how voters might be torn over which film depicts the conflict better.
I can definitely see that.
Whereas all five of these because usually with the best documentary feature category, they want each film to have its own specific theme and have each of them be as different as possible. And in all these cases, you have Jane, which is of course about Jane Goodall. You have Faces Places, which involve legendary French director Agnes Varda and her friend JR. I don't know what his real name is, and they don't reveal it. They go all over rural France, visiting little towns and everything. Then Icarus, of course, it's about the Russian doping scandal for the 2016 Olympics. Then an inconvenient sequel, Truth to Power, that's a follow-up to An Inconvenient Truth. And of course, I'm sure voters will find it really relevant now, given the fact that the first film won the Oscar 10 years ago, and the fact that Donald Trump decided to pull the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement may make a lot of voters feel outraged enough to want to nominate this as like a middle finger to him.
Uh-huh. And speaking of Trump, I guess we'll be going over, well, I guess we'll be mentioning him again in the next category, which is Best Foreign Language Film. My current rankings are...
Oh, but hold on, I didn't give a reason for LA 92 getting in here.
Oh, okay, do that first.
So I have LA 92 getting in here because, well, it managed to win the Emmy for exceptional merit in documentary filmmaking, and usually nominees in that category are often films that were nominated at the Oscars too, because
And I believe it even beats OJ Made in America.
Yep, and the directors of LA 92 are Daniel Lindsay and TJ Martin, who both won this Oscar back in 2011 for their documentary Undefeated. And, given the fact that 2017 marked the 25th anniversary of the Los Angeles riots, and with just all the stuff we've seen going on recently in this country, I could see how that could impact voters and make them take a look at this, especially since the Oscars are located in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so are you now ready to talk about foreign language film?
Yep.
All right. My current rankings in that category are A Fantastic Woman, Loveless, The Square, Foxtrot, and In the Fade.
All right. Well, I have the same nominees, just in a different order.
Okay, what's your current rankings?
As of right now, I have Loveless, A Fantastic Woman, In the Fade, The Square, and Foxtrot.
Oh yeah, we should talk about how In the Fade is not the best reviewed movie out there, yet it managed to win foreign language film at both Golden Globes, and even more questionable, Critics' Choice.
Mm-hmm. But hold on, let me actually look up the history of both of those awards for Best Foreign Language Film, because I know they don't always line up with the Oscars, and of course that could partly be that they have different nominees a lot of the time.
Well, yeah, like Elle won the Globe last year, while it wasn't even eligible at the Oscars.
Right, and yeah, hold on, I mean, most of the time with the Oscars and the Golden Globes, they do line up for Best Foreign Language Film, but there are some differences, like Leviathan won the Golden Globe while Ida won the Oscar. The White Ribbon famously won the Golden Globe, and it was expected to win the Oscar too, but then the Oscar went to The Secret of In Their Eyes from Argentina. And Waltz with Bashir won the Golden Globe, and many people thought that would win the Oscar, but instead it went to Departures from Japan. Diving Bell and the Butterfly won the Golden Globe, but then The Counterfeiters won the Oscar. And then for the Critics' Choice Awards, let me see, because I know with the Critics' Choice Awards, they gave Blue Is the Warmest Color the Best Foreign Language Film Award, whereas with the Oscars, Blue Is the Warmest Color wasn't eligible because it wasn't released in French theaters in time for it to have been sent to the Academy for consideration. So, but yeah, so the Critics' Choice they've missed with the Oscars a few times. They picked The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, while the Oscars picked The Counterfeiters. They picked Waltz with Bashir, while the Oscars picked Departures. They picked Broken Embraces, while the Oscars picked The Secret in Their Eyes. They picked The Original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, while the Oscars picked In a Better World. Then they picked Blue Is the Warmest Color, and of course that was not eligible to be nominated at the Oscars for Best Foreign Language Film, but it was eligible to be nominated for Best Picture. But of course it didn't get nominated there. And the Oscars picked The Great Beauty. Then they picked, Critics' Choice picked Force Majeure, while the Oscars picked Ida, and then last year, yes, the Critics' Choice did pick Elle, while the Oscars picked The Salesman.
Yes, and Elle wasn't even eligible at the Oscars, like I said.
Yep.
Yes, and speaking of Salesman and Levithian, yeah, the director of the latter film is the director of Loveless, and we've discussed, off camera that, if Loveless could have a similar trajectory The Salesman had last year, given the Trump factor.
Well, yeah, but it's worth noting that the director of Loveless, Andrei Zivagintsev, what could help him here is that he's a public critic of Vladimir Putin. If he were a supporter of Vladimir Putin, I think his chances of being winning, let alone nominated, would be very low, given that Trump and Putin are like best friends basically. So if Loveless should win, it would probably be very interesting because not only would voters see it as a big middle finger to Vladimir Putin the same way The Salesman was seen as a big middle finger to Donald Trump, but it would be interesting to see what Andrei Zivagintsev would say on stage. Would he use his speaking time to criticize Vladimir Putin directly, even if he didn't mention him directly by name? Because the Oscars are happening like right before Russia's next presidential election, where Putin is probably going to win re-election. But imagine him being called out by one of his fellow countrymen from America right before the election is about to happen. And also I think I think what could also help Loveless is the fact, and I wrote this in the forums for the category for best foreign language film, is that Oscar voters throughout all of Oscar history have often nominated films, whether they're American films or foreign films, that feature children going through very horrible circumstances that you wouldn't want any child to go through, and that you can't help but want to root for these children and want them to overcome what they're going through. And because it's quite often in a lot of movies, they don't always make child characters very likable. They often make them either precocious or really annoying. But when you do have the child characters that makes you want to root for them, they're usually kids who are in a situation that you can feel empathy for them. Because, like, for instance, in 2011, 5 of the 9 nominees for Best Picture had children going through difficult circumstances. You had The Descendants, where you had these 2 girls whose mother was in a coma and going to die because there was no way she was going to recover. Then you had Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, about a boy who lost his father on 9/11. Then you had Hugo, which is about a boy who becomes an orphan after his father dies, and then when his alcoholic uncle abandons him, he literally has no one but himself. And then you had
Warhorse.
I'm just thinking of the 4th one because Warhorse was the last one. Descendants, Extremely Loud, Incredibly Close. Oh, The Tree of Life. The Tree of Life. Because The Tree of Life is about a young boy who has a very complicated relationship with his father. The father's particularly strict with him, almost borderline emotionally abusive. And then you have Warhorse, about a teenage boy who fights in World War I. And in Best Foreign Language Film, you've had a lot of films featuring children not only be nominated but win, like The Tin Drum, Fanny and Alexander, Life is Beautiful. I think In a Better World has a bunch of teenagers as the protagonist. So if you look at past history of this category and of the Oscars in general, a film like Loveless is kind of the prime example of a nominee or winner. But I could also see a Fantastic Woman pulling off a win here as well, possibly because it's, we've seen a lot of films about transgender individuals, but this one will be a bit different because this is one of the rare times where a transgender character is played by an actual transgender person.
Okay. Yeah, so now on to the final three categories, which are the short categories, the toughest categories to predict.
Which is why for these categories, beforehand, I did not really look at what other people were thinking. I just I looked up the plot summaries of all of them and I just looked at what they were all about. And then I kind of decided which ones would have the most appeal based on the plot descriptions alone. And I decided to predict that way because I've found in the past, whenever I've tried looking at the experts' predictions and try to do that for myself, I often get a lot of my predictions wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what do you have what are your rankings for best animated short?
Okay, so I have In a Heartbeat, Dear Basketball, Lou, Fox and the Whale, and Cradle.
I currently have In a Heartbeat, Dear Basketball, Cradle, Lou, and Negative Space.
I guess I picked mine because all five of them seem to have very different animation styles. Some are and then a few of them are all ages friendly, and a couple seem more mature and adults only. And that's usually the combination you see every year in the nominees because I always end up watching all the shorts when they show them at my art house theater.
Mm.
So I'm also kind of looking at trends of what voters usually always seem to pick.
Yeah. So are you ready to discuss documentary short?
Yep.
All
So right now I have
right. I think it's my turn.
oh oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, my current rankings are Alone, 10 Meter Down, Heroin E, 116 Cameras, and Edith and Eddie.
All right. So I have I have Heroin, 116 Cameras, Edith and Eddie, Traffic Stop, and Kayayo, The Living Shopping Baskets.
Mm.
Yeah, because um, you know, Heroin, that's I've noticed quite a lot of Netflix shorts get nominated here, and Heroin is a Netflix short. Plus, it deals with things like poverty and drug addiction, which are very common themes in documentaries. 116 Cameras, that's about a Holocaust survivor, and those tend to do very well in the documentary shorts. And it's quite a unique concept for this one because it's about a Holocaust survivor who decides to have a digital 3D projection of her created so that when she dies, her story can still live on for like people 100 years from now when, because in 100 years there will be no more Holocaust survivors.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's this organization, I think it's the Shoah Foundation, which they like put put all these cameras on you and take like all these pictures of you so they can create, I guess, kind of like a digital projection of you to tell your story for future generations who won't be able to meet you in person.
Oh, yes, and I should point out that Netflix has so far only done well at the Oscars in the documentary categories.
Mm. But then Edith and Eddie and Traffic Stop, I think, could have a strong chance because they both deal with race. With Edith and Eddie, it's about an elderly interracial couple in their 90s and the controversy of them being interracial that they have to deal with. And then Traffic Stop is about a black man who almost lost his life after being stopped by a police officer. And then Kayayo, The Living Shopping Baskets. I think that even though that's ranked very low on Gold Derby's predictions, I think it could be nominated because it deals with a child in a developing country that has to go through some pretty terrible circumstances. Basically, it's about a little girl in I forget which African country it is, but she basically has to carry these giant baskets on her head that weigh 100 pounds, in the hope that people will buy something, and she does it as a way to support her family.
Okay. So now one more category to go, and that's best live action short. So what's currently in your rankings?
DeKalb Elementary, The Silent Child, My Nephew Emmett, Icebox, and Witnesses.
Okay, my rankings are DeKalb Elementary, The Silent Child, Watu Wote, All of Us, My Nephew Emmett, and Rise of a Star.
Mm. Yeah, and Rise of a Star, I noticed out of all of them, it actually has a well-known star in it, which most of these shorts don't. It has Oscar nominee Catherine Deneuve in it, although of course Catherine Deneuve recently came under fire for criticizing the Me Too movement as being sexist towards men,
Hmm.
which I bet probably if voters know that she was in Rise of a Star, that could probably impact that film getting nominated here.
Hmm. Interesting.
But yeah, but as for my rankings, I have DeKalb Elementary here because I've noticed that with live action shorts, the winners almost always seem to be these very tense, very dramatic mini thrillers of sorts, where it feels like it's a full movie in the course of like 30 minutes. Because DeKalb Elementary, I guess it's based on a true story of a guy taking elementary school kids hostage or something. Um, and then The Silent Child, basically, it's like a real life story that bears a lot of eerie similarities to the story of Helen Keller and Anne Sullivan.
Hmm.
Although this one it's set in England and not America. And then My Nephew Emmett, I think that'll do very well because you know it's a race related story, and these stories are always very popular in the shorts. And of course, this one is also based on a true story about the murder of Emmett Till in 1955.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then Icebox, that's like ranked pretty low, but I have it high here on the list because it deals with a young boy from Honduras who comes into the United States illegally, and he's placed in like a juvenile detention center for illegal immigrants or something, and it's about him going through the immigration system. And when I read the plot summary, it actually kind of reminded me of the scene in The Godfather Part 2 where the young Vito Corleone, all by himself, immigrates to America as a young child, and we see him have to go through immigration. They change his name because they think his name is too complicated, and then he has to be put into quarantine because he has smallpox.
Hmm.
And like an icebox implies that the kid comes to America all by himself with no other family with him.
Hmm.
and
Okay.
then and then witnesses I have in last place, and then witnesses I have on here because quite a lot of these shorts often feature stories about people in the Middle East, and witnesses is set in the Middle East. So
Okay, so now that we've covered all 24 categories, okay, Oscar nominations will be announced Tuesday morning. And I guess in conclusion, I guess what are some, well, without getting too much into detail, what are some, I guess, potential nominees that you're now predicting, but you'd be most happy to see recognized?
mm, it'd be nice to see Wonder sneak into the Best Picture category
Hmm. Oh, yeah.
because we've seen family friendly films get nominated here before, like Beauty and the Beast, E.T., Up, Toy Story 3, Hugo, and to a controversial degree, extremely loud and incredibly close.
And Life of Pi, and maybe The Blind Side.
True. Well, Life of Pi, I'm not sure that's for like young kids, but
Well, yeah, even though it was rated PG.
right. But then The Blind Side, yeah, that that definitely was a family friendly film. As for other nominees, uh, mm, it would be nice to see The Lost City of Z get in for something because that was one of my favorite films of last year. Or Detroit. That film hasn't gotten any awards love, and it certainly deserves it. Uh,
Well, yeah, it had to come out in August to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the events in Detroit. Yet flopped at the box office.
right, but we've seen box office flops be nominees before, so
Well, yeah, like Hugo,
or
The Wizard of Oz.
yep, or It's a Wonderful Life. That was a box office flop.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So, anything
Um,
else?
mm, Trying to think. Oh, okay. In Best Supporting Actor, if Michael Shannon somehow gets a surprise nomination there, I'll be so happy for him. And in fact, I'm probably going to put him in first place in my Gold Derby Awards ballot when I fill that out.
Yeah, wouldn't it be so interesting how every time Shannon gets nominated, it's a surprise?
Right.
Yeah, like for Revolutionary Road, he got nowhere, yet all of a sudden showed up Oscar nomination morning. And the year he was getting in everywhere for 99 Homes, he gets snubbed by the Academy. And last year, where he pretty much got nowhere for Nocturnal Animals, he suddenly showed up Oscar nomination morning.
Although I think he got I'll have to check. Hold on, I'm going to check right now because I think he got. Well, let me see. Yeah, he did. He did get a Critics' Choice nomination for Nocturnal Animals before he got the Oscar nomination.
Well, okay, so yeah, but still, after that, he got in nowhere else. But still, he showed up Oscar nomination morning.
Yep.
Yes.
I mean, it'd be nice to see either Garrett Hedlund or Jason Mitchell get a nomination for Mudbound.
Yeah.
And same thing with Dee Rees as Best Director for Mudbound, because no Black woman has yet been nominated for Best Director.
And I'm sure they probably want to do Poetic Justice after snubbing Ava DuVernay for Selma.
Mm-hmm. Who else would be a good nominee here? Oh, and Best Actor. Obviously, he's not going to be nominated because and his age could be a big factor, but he would certainly be deserving of a nomination. Jacob Tremblay for Wonder.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then let me. For Best Supporting Actor, it'd be kind of nice to see either Mark Rylance for Dunkirk or Barry Keoghan for The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
And isn't Barry Keoghan also in Dunkirk?
He is, but I mean, he's good in Dunkirk, but in like Killing of a Sacred Deer, he really gets like a lot of Oscar type material to work off of because he plays like this weird, creepy, teenager. At first he just seems really weird and creepy, but then as the film goes on, he's not just weird and creepy. He's basically a psychopath.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like so disturbing. It's just like you're just like, ugh. I mean, and he's kind of like he's a psychopath almost kind of in the same way that Aaron Taylor Johnson is in Nocturnal Animals. But here, instead of being like all like Western redneck like Aaron Taylor Johnson was, he's kind of like your average but weird teenager who, as the film goes on, his sinister nature becomes more and more evident to the point where you're just like, ooh, get me out of here. Ooh, just do something to him already. Just like have him arrested or something. Because he's like, I mean, it's Killing of a Sacred Deer. It's a very bizarre film. I mean, it sounds simple in its premise if I were to tell you its premise, but then the way it's executed, it's like, like it's the kind of film some people really love and other people will be like, WTF was that?
Yeah. So
there might be one more that I'm thinking of. It'd be nice to see Coco get either a Best Picture or a Best Original Screenplay nomination.
Oh yeah, that'd be deserving my book.
Other than that, I can't really think of anything else at the moment.
Okay, as for me, I guess some surprise nominations I'm not predicting, but would be happy to see include Jake Gyllenhaal for Stronger. He really so impressively shown himself as such a versatile actor in recent years that, it's just surprising that his only nomination was in 2005, and I guess Tracy Letts would also be a welcome surprise for me for Lady Bird, because he really was, I guess, of the two parents, him and Laurie Metcalf, he really had so much heart. He was really such a caring father in that movie. And in fact, Daniel Montgomery actually wrote an article saying that if Letts somehow manages to sneak into the Best Supporting Actor race, that could be a sign of how strong Lady Bird could be.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess also maybe Bob Odenkirk for the Post, because since I've now seen the Post, I can agree with what a lot of people said, of all the supporting cast in that members in that movie, that he was definitely the standout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, it's worth noting that his co-star from his former co-star David Cross was also in the Post, and
From Mr. Show.
Yeah, and at first, and I had known David Cross would be in the movie, but at first I was like wondering, where is he? But then I was like, yeah. Oh, there he is, because he's hiding under a wig and glasses.
Well, that's how I felt about Tracy Letts in the Post, because he looks maybe slightly different when you come to think of it, but still, he usually has white hair in real life. But in the Post, he pretty much either dyed it or wore a wig, but still, he looked different.
Right, but I mean, with David Cross, it's easy to recognize him in real life because he's bald, and in here he's wearing a toupee.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing that made me recognize David Cross was his voice, because he has kind of a high-pitched voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's how I recognize Tracy Letts, because I know his voice. In fact, I recently watched some Home Improvement on Hulu, and when I got to the end credits of one episode, I was surprised to see he was on it. So, I guess that's all we can basically cover right now, unless you have any last-minute thoughts you'd like to express to the viewers.
None that I can think of at this moment.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, good luck on your Oscar predictions, and hopefully any one of us do the best we can. See ya.
Bye.